In classical antiquity, Roman pagan temples were designed as dense, enclosed houses for a cult statue. The interiors were small and largely inaccessible to the general public. Because the interior was reserved for the god, human ritual happened entirely outside the structure. Public gatherings and sacrifices took place in the open air, surrounding the monument. That tradition faced a sudden challenge in 313 AD. With the Edict of Milan, Emperor Constantine legalized Christianity, moving faith from private homes into the public sphere. Christian worship was a communal liturgy that required a massive enclosed space. This environment had to be large enough to hold a full congregation while keeping the uninitiated public separate from the sacred mysteries. You can see the result here in Santa Sabina. Instead of a solid core, the building is a vast open nave. The long rows of columns create a sheltered interior where the community could gather. As Christianity became the state religion, it entirely inverted the Roman architectural model. The focus moved from the exterior monument to the creation of immense interior volume. Early builders didn't invent this form from scratch. They co-opted secular Roman halls, buildings originally used for law and commerce, to solve their space problem. But as the empire fractured into a Latin West and a Greek East, the architecture began to split along geographic and political lines. But this wasn't just a political divide. The two regions developed entirely different ways of expressing their faith through stone and light. This split created two opposing structural models that would define sacred design for 1,000 years: the Western longitudinal path and the Eastern centralized cosmos. The West leaned into the Roman basilica, a secular, multi-purpose hall and law court. It was a shape the Romans already knew how to build at scale. Architects modified the floor plan for the liturgy. They shifted entrances to the west and expanded the eastern apse, creating a focal point for the altar. This established a hierarchy: the atrium, the narthex porch, the central nave, and the transept crossing. This specific geometry dictates how the worshipper experiences the building. The space is strictly linear and axial, pointed toward the rising sun in the east. The repeating rhythm of the columns along the nave pulls the eye horizontally. The architecture forces a physical procession from the door to the sanctuary. Interiors were rich, but exteriors, like here at Santa Sabina, remained intentionally plain brick shells. Builders signaled that true beauty was an interior, spiritual reality. The Western Basilica physically represents a specific idea. Faith is a journey through time toward salvation. In the Byzantine East, the goal was different. Instead of a journey, architects wanted to create a building that represented a perfect divine universe. This led to the defining Eastern building style, a centralized space crowned by a massive dome. This design presented a major geometric and structural challenge: how to securely place a heavy, circular dome on top of a square base. Earlier Roman engineers solved this by resting the Pantheon's dome on a continuous circular drum. The supporting wall and the dome were the same shape. The Byzantine solution was the pendentive, allowing the circular dome to sit on a square. These curved triangular vaults bridge the corners, channeling thousands of tons of weight from the dome's rim directly down into 4 massive piers. Because the weight was now concentrated in the corners, the walls between the piers no longer had to be thick or solid. This changed the rules of architectural enclosure. With the base walls freed from their load-bearing duty, Byzantine architects began to open up the structure beneath the dome. They cut a ring of 40 windows, a clear story, directly into the base of the dome itself. This creates a different experience for the viewer. Instead of being pulled forward like in the West, the worshipper stands in the center, surrounded by an all-encompassing environment. The light from those windows creates a striking optical illusion. It makes the heavy stone of the dome appear to lose its weight. To the people on the ground, it looked as if the masonry was floating, suspended from heaven. The light dematerialized the massive structure. This effect was deliberately calculated. The architects used light and engineering to make the presence of the divine feel physically real to the person standing below. When we compare these two models side by side, we see how architecture manifests different ideas of faith. The Western Church used the linear hall to mirror a rational, step-by-step logic, guiding the individual on an organized journey toward the altar. The Eastern Church used the centralized dome to emphasize mystery, immersing the individual in a timeless, divine atmosphere that exists all around them. The choice between a longitudinal hall and a centralized dome wasn't just a matter of style, it was a choice about how humans should encounter the sacred. Byzantine architects achieved this effect using mosaics, designed specifically to bounce light throughout the interior. They used glass tesserae called smalti, manufactured with the gold sandwich technique. By fusing gold leaf between layers of glass and setting the pieces at slightly uneven angles, they created surfaces that shimmered and glowed, removing sacred figures from the realism of the physical world. The achievements of this era, the adaptation of the basilica, the invention of the pendentive, and the science of the mosaic, provided the toolkit for almost all subsequent Christian design. These architects did more than just solve a space problem. They created the foundational shapes that would define